Hello, everyone. It's the 18th of May, 2023, and I am so excited about this interview with Jennifer Say. You may or may not have heard of Jennifer, but she was the Chief Marketing Officer for Levi Strauss for 8 years. You can correct me if I'm wrong. 2 years she was brand president. This was managing a team of 1,000 people. Very responsible, very important job. Then she started to speak out about school closures and the impact of those. And we are actually going to be talking, though, about running a massive business and what it means to be a CEO. And we're going to be talking about a Substack article that you wrote about the new CEO of Twitter, Linda Yaccarino, because I think that's very interesting. We are in a position now where, COVID is gone. It's 2023. We're looking to the future. We're looking at media being incredibly important, the power of people like Elon Musk, and what a leader should look like, and what the future you think there is for, say, platforms like Twitter. So thank you so much for coming to the channel. We're also going to be talking about your journey over the last 3 years and what you did and stood up for. Because I want to just mention your pin tweet because I think it sums this up beautifully. It was a New York Times headline and it said about you, she was a candidate to lead Levi's and then she started tweeting. You've put this New York Times headline is now my resume. It demonstrates foresight, undeterred by false narratives, unafraid to do the right thing, data informed, decisive, influences effectively, leverages power of social media and leads. Now, you would have been a good CEO of Twitter, I would have said. I like that a lot. So I've been talking a lot there. If I introduced you correctly there, can you tell me a little bit about what happened, and then we'll go on to talk about the new CEO of Twitter?
Sure. Yeah. I had worked at Levi's for 23 years and I ended my career in the two roles you mentioned. I was a very successful chief marketing officer and got promoted to brand president. And in fact, brand president, just so it's clear, is overseeing all products. So, the design team, the merchandising team, all the jeans you wear, maybe if they're Levi's, that came out of my team. We did all the design of the stores, data, research, insight, that was in my group. So I do consider myself to be pretty facile with numbers and data. I did the brand president job for 2 years at the end. And during that 2 years, there was an internal conflict the entire time because I continued to be outspoken about closed public schools in San Francisco and nationally. My children go and went at the time to public school, which was not only unusual, but completely unique amongst my peers who all sent their kids to private schools for $60,000 or $70,000 a year. And they were in-person school. Those children were going to actual school, and 50,000 children in San Francisco, majority of which are low income, those children were denied schooling. And I couldn't stop talking about it, even when I was told very sternly that I needed to stop. And I was called every name you can be called, from, a racist to a murderer. And I knew that I knew that wasn't true about myself. And I continued, and eventually I was told there wasn't a place for me at the company any longer.
But you didn't take the money in the NDA. That's what I heard.
That's correct. Sorry, I left that part out. So, rather than fire me, which I think I'm not sure they really, could have done, they told me there wasn't a place for me. They offered me money, about $1 million, that would have come with a non-disclosure agreement. What the non-disclosure agreement, and I say this having, executed many layoffs over my time, 23 years at Levi's, a severance package always comes with a non-disclosure. And what you cannot disclose and what you're signing off on is that you won't disclose the terms of your departure, why you are, being outed, which of course they didn't want me to talk about. And you're also signing away any ability to pursue any litigation. Those are the principles in the non-disclosure agreement. And I didn't have an interest in litigating. I just had an interest in being able to retain my voice and talk about this censorship and illiberalism and viewpoint discrimination that had occurred inside the company. So I did not want to sign an NDA, which meant I could not receive the money. And then I quit very publicly so that I could talk about these things.
What an amazing woman. So you basically turned down $1 million to do this, to continue to speak. So it's very important. We do talk to you and we do hear your story. And I think it's incredibly important that these companies are held to account for what happened. I'm going to mention, we're going to go on to the talking about your Substack article about what the new CEO of Twitter could look like, or why they picked her. But you going back to this school's closing, so I also had a real concern about children. So I was lucky in that I live in somewhere with a garden, and I kept thinking about children, maybe a single parent in a flat.
Me too.
The
Yeah.
The place, the school was a safe place for a lot of children, where the teachers can keep an eye on them, make sure they get free school dinners and things like that. And that really, the fact that I couldn't talk about it, that was the very thing that was very uncomfortable. And I'll tell you why we couldn't talk about it, because look what happened to you and the names you were called. But anyway, I did an interview with someone called Dr. Rick O'Shea, who's a Cardiff GP, and he came out and said he had two 8-year-old boys, saw how it was impacting to them. We had a great organisation here called Us for Them, campaigning for children against school closures and the mask mandates. Anyway, we did get, so people go, oh, the mainstream media, or, don't trust them, don't like them. Well, they did run the story in Wales Online, and that was in July 2020. However, this chap nearly lost his job. Yeah, this doctor, this family doctor nearly lost his job, very nearly lost his job for speaking out. But you may or may not be aware, obviously, these emails that were leaked from the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, thanks to Isabel Oakeshott, they're shown that the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, didn't want the schools to close. I believe he was considering resigning. And even our own Prime Minister, it's come out in the lockdown files in The Spectator in August 2022, that he, again, did not want the schools to close. So they didn't say anything at the time. But people like you and me and this doctor, we did speak out, and we really suffered for that. And I'm worried about the future, because that was a test, wasn't it? It was a test, that COVID situation. And I don't think we did very well. No,
we failed collectively. We failed.
We failed. And you've got 4 children, I've got 3 children. And I'm thinking, for the rest of my life, this has to be a fight to make a world where that courage is rewarded, that you showed, and those values, those really important values of freedom and choice and debate, are just so incredibly important. But I just quickly to mention as well, and we're going to crack on then. I've not ever mentioned this before. So I was working for a corporate communications company. I was going and do media training. I was showing them how to film and edit on an iPhone, and working in big corporate companies as a freelance, earning about £1,000 a day. Very good money indeed. Then I started to speak out like you. Worried about censorship, very much so, and the lockdown, not being able to debate it, look at things like the Great Barrington Declaration, herd immunity, etc. Obviously, this got the notice of an organisation called Admiral, and I've printed off their email that they sent to me in July 2020. Just to be clear, we require removal of all references to Admiral from your website, including any reference to work you may have done with Admiral Group in the past. So that was, I knew at that point, I'm probably not going to be doing this kind of work again. They can't say I didn't work for them, because I did. You can't tell me not to
do that.
It's crazy. That came from the legal department as well. You'd think they'd know better. Anyway, there's been a lot of pain. There's been a lot of sacrifice. Was it worth it? What are you doing now? Was it all worth it? Let's talk about that first.
I have days where I wonder that, certainly, but I always come back to yes. People ask me all the time, why is this the hill you were willing to die on? And my response is, why weren't you? I mean, if you're not willing to die on the hill for children and protection of children and their well-being and development, and you're not willing to die on a hill for free speech, which I think is foundational and fundamental. It's the First Amendment for a reason. In the United States, you don't have a free society if you don't have free speech. And speech was not free and hasn't been, during this time frame for a variety of reasons. I mean, one, we now know there was actually government intervention on social media platforms. People were blacklisted. You mentioned Great Barrington. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, the day he joined Twitter, was blacklisted because of the Great Barrington Declaration. But the social censorship and ostracizing really kept people quiet as well. I mean, you mentioned the prime minister didn't say anything. That is because they don't want to kind of battle the mob, but that's not leadership. If he knew the right thing to do and he knew children were going to be harmed, gosh darn it, stand up and kind of move the conversation. And that's what is so
the conversation, wasn't it? It wasn't, and you
It
do
was
focus, because I passionately didn't enjoy lockdown. It wasn't a good lockdown for me, yeah. But that doesn't mean I can't understand that some people thought it was absolutely the right thing to do. It was that conversation wasn't allowed to take place. That was the really
that's the thing.
eerie bit.
There, right. That exactly. And that it wasn't great for me. We were a family that lived in a flat with no yard. And, granted, I was well compensated executive. We had a nice apartment, but I couldn't stop thinking about the families one block away from me because in the city, you live in a mixed up community and it's all different kind of levels of income. And one block away, there's people living in subsidized housing and 1 or 2 room apartments, children left home during the day by themselves because perhaps their parents are hourly wage workers. It didn't take a lot of imagination that this situation was really harmful and damaging for the most vulnerable children among us.
Oh, it's coming out now, Jennifer. There's articles all the time that I see.
Of course.
Children that died during lockdown from suicide or from neglect or
Yep.
abuse.
Or continue to suffer the mental health impacts. School attendance here in America is at an all-time low. Kids just aren't going back. They fell so far behind. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But, as far as the censorship, whether sort of self-imposed, socially imposed, or government imposed, which it absolutely was, it sort of created this idea that there was consensus when there wasn't. There was never consensus about any of this being the right path forward. It violated every sort of pre-pandemic plan or playbook, which had been made not in the midst of panic. You should never make a plan when you're panicked. You should follow the plan you made when you were being more strategic. But they manufactured consensus by silencing any dissenters. And some persisted, people like Jay Bhattacharya. But it was very difficult and you had to steel yourself against it. And there were doctors that persisted. There were a handful of journalists that persisted, and there were normies like me that persisted. But we were by far the minority, and the name calling and just dragging across the internet of people like us and, being, made to be unemployed, that kept other people silent, even if they were, wondering if this was the right path. They just sort of felt like, well, why would I put myself through that? I'll just wait for this to end. And it didn't end. It went on and on and on, and the harms are now clear. So, I don't know. I don't know how to do this other than to keep picking up myself and
You can't
sort of
talk about it
inspire others.
anymore. You can't talk about it anymore here or in the UK because no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to talk about it. COVID is over. I've been going to business startup course. I'm looking to get investment now for a new media brand, and I'm mixing with the business community and startups and learning about venture capitalism. And I did a workshop with someone in marketing. He said, no, we're not talking about that. No, we don't talk about COVID anymore. So
yeah, I mean,
I'm
people have
aware
sort
you
of
can't talk about something if no one wants to talk about it. Probably because, Jennifer, there was so much shame and embarrassment
well,
about
that's
what
true.
they
No,
did.
well, they know that, I would say in the United States, what people are willing to talk about and admit is that harms were done. What they are not willing to do is go one step beyond that and say there are actual human beings that are accountable for those harms. No, it was not the fog of war. We knew better. If we didn't know in February or March, we certainly knew by May, when Denmark had opened, all these, Northern European schools and schools across Europe, frankly, they were very restricted, but open. In California, it was a full 19 months before schools opened at all.
Wow.
But no one's willing to sort of say there are actual human beings that made poor decisions, that were not data driven, that were totally myopic. They furthered fear. The press was complicit. The press failed to interrogate the issues. I mean, my frustration with the press, like there is no fourth estate here in America anymore. They just published government issued talking points, and Pfizer issued talking points as if it's news. And I'm sorry, people might be sick of talking about it, but the kids were harmed. That keeps getting reported on. Lowest SAT scores in 30 years, lowest scores in reading in 30 years. That keeps getting, highest absenteeism rates. And so they may not want to talk about it, but I'm not going to stop. I may not be successful in driving any accountability, but all the people that made these decisions still have their jobs.
Well, here we've still got the same political parties.
Exactly.
I mean, Lib Dems were a bit better because they were against vaccine passports. So I've joined the Liberal Democrats here, but I mean, it's very confusing to me, to be honest with you, that we've still got those people. We haven't formed new. Well, this is what we're going to do. This is the
Yeah,
future, isn't it? This is the
that's right.
exciting bit. We've got AI
That's right.
coming along as well.
That's right.
We've got a future here to construct, and a lot of media of the alternative media or the new media brands that have come along since COVID, and as people have joined in different communities, all these different platforms. Some of them, I think, have come from a place of fear, and
Yeah.
I've distanced myself from it, quite cynical and quite scared about the future. Whereas I
Yeah.
really want to promote a message of hope and excitement. That's
Yes.
what we're going to work on, isn't it? And if I
I,
ever get the money, I would love to take you on. I absolutely probably couldn't afford you, but it's people like you I'll be looking for. I
I,
want to be in a team with people like you.
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, look, I'm daunted by it, but I'm not willing to give up. And that alone is a message of hope and optimism. If I believed there were no hope, I would stop trying. But the message shifts, it shifts slowly over time. I think the thing that people who went first and early and pushed back on this have to get past is we need to let those who want to join, who were maybe wrong at first, like it can't be a purity test. You know, there's sort of a mode of operating here because there was only a handful of us that kind of saw it early and pushed back very early from March 2020. Well, others have realized that perhaps they were wrong or they were driven by their fear and that this whole thing was catastrophic. We need to welcome them to the fight. Any comer I'm willing to take on. And yeah, I mean, I have hope. It moves slowly, Anna. You know, you just got to I wouldn't keep trying if I didn't believe we could get there.
Make a difference. Well, you have your experience in the corporate world, very successful. You know all about brands. That's your, that you must have been in a lot of money. You understand how business works, and that's very powerful marketing. And I want to just mention your interview with Dr. Ed Brenegar, which is on YouTube. He's in channels called Leadership for a World in Transition, because there's more on this topic in particular. And I was listening to you saying that companies talk about being social justice warriors and having a soul, but they don't have a soul. They're there purely to make money. That's what they're all about.
Well, I think that's what's confusing now as we watch what's unfolding. And I'll admit, 23 years at Levi's, it changed dramatically in terms of how we marketed the brand. The goals were the same: elevate the brand, drive revenue, drive profit.
Now, I want to move on to the topic of the conversation, which is the new CEO of Twitter. She's 60 years old. She has two children. She lives in New York. Linda Yaccarino, I hope I've said that properly. She's a former chairman of global advertising and partnerships at NBC Universal. And you wrote a Substack about it because you were like, I thought it was really interesting. How did Elon Musk well, I've been reading some articles today. CNN have written and suggested that he's in a world of trouble at the minute, and Twitter needs to be rescued. And just this week, Musk drew black backlash for baselessly attacking billionaire George Soros, a frequent target for anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, saying the financier hates humanity. But Musk said he didn't care if his controversial tweets drew any kind of anger for distaste from Twitter advertisers or Tesla shareholders. He said, I'll say what I want to say, and if the consequence of that is losing money, so be it. And it's, many major, this CNN article has said, many major advertisers left the platform following Musk's takeover over concerns about an uptick of hate speech. 43% of Twitter's top 1,000 advertisers as of September, the month before Musk's takeover, were still advertising on the platform as of last month, according to market intelligence firm Sensor Tower. So this is an interesting one. Twitter is
Yeah.
a really interesting one. And I want to know what you think and why you wrote that article about the new CEO.
Well, I think, look, he's in a tough spot. I don't think the media is being totally kind of fair or honest here. They've decided he's, enemy number one. And so everything, Twitter needs rescuing. Why aren't they writing an article that Bud Light needs rescuing? Bud Light sales are down more than 20% in 1 month's time, but that doesn't fit their narrative, and their narrative is that Elon is this sort of alt-right, right-wing person who wants to destroy civility and promote hate speech, which it could not be further from the truth. That's ridiculous. And he's cut off access for some of these journalists, and they had it in the past, and so they're mad. And who knows if it's coordinated? But I think he's been unfairly tarred and feathered. They have lost a lot of advertisers. The press contributes to that. I'm a very active Twitter user. I haven't noticed more hate speech. I find, well, I'm the recipient of less hate speech. So I would say it's been reduced for me in the last 2 years. But back to the business, I think he set a very clear vision for what Twitter can be. That is not a short-term goal. That is a long-term goal. And I think he's in it for the long term. We'll see, although this hire makes me kind of scratch my head a little bit. His vision for the brand and the business is to be really the only destination for free speech and open dialogue. That doesn't exist anymore. You have legacy media, which, whether they admit it or not, have one particular view and silence and censor any other view. You have social media, which, as we've seen, has been silencing dissenters. And then you have very siloed media, the new media, if you will, podcasts, et cetera. But they're targeting a narrow audience and usually promote a single point of view. So where is it that you can actually hear people? There used to be a show in America
This is
called
what happened,
Crossfire.
isn't it? Yeah, when there was censorship, people went to Telegram, but then it wasn't a place for everyone. It was like, and then everyone went to Getter, which was founded by Jason Miller, a former Donald Trump aide. Well, what you're going to get at Getter, don't you?
Yeah, but there's no place where you can. Yeah, you need to have the conversations, and no one is really doing that. I think some people in the heterodox space try, but they don't do it either. So I think, that's what Elon has said, and it's clear to me he wants to do that not just as a social media platform, but as a content provider. And he's trying to engage recently fired pundit or fired or ousted Tucker Carlson. That's one kind of content, but to have folks from different backgrounds and potentially talking to each other, which we used to have here in the US. There was a show, Crossfire, famously brought people together, opposite sides of the spectrum, to debate. But that's completely changed because now the other side is too evil to even talk to. That's really how it ends up being positioned.
So humanity has been growing apart instead of coming together. So
yes,
it's interesting.
We have a conversation. Let's say, I don't know, pick any issue of the day you and I may be diametrically opposed on. I'm happy to talk about that.
I'll tell you why, because what happens is people will sit in that community and that news channel that they follow, and they will be in it all day, and it becomes who they are. It's their values, it's their community. So if you try and have a conversation with somebody who's not in that world, their own world all the time, it gets really difficult. In the old days when I was brought up, we had 4 channels on the telly. We all watched the same thing. Now we're all watching our own thing. And you can't have a conversation. I've been dating recently. If I'm watching the BBC and reading the Mail every day, can I have a conversation with somebody who's only ever on Telegram or following Infowars or something? I wouldn't be able to have a conversation about anything. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So I think the media landscape has contributed. I think here in the United States, the election of Donald Trump contributed because he was seen as such a uniquely vile, evil person by the left that it used to be you could have a person from the right and a person from the left, and they could be friends. You could even be a part of a political party and not agree with the entire platform. That's not the case anymore. So that here in the United States, at least, really dramatically increased the polarization. I mean, it was not uncommon that families would be divided over this. And then I think COVID accelerated that. My point is, I think Elon has set a clear vision, and I think he believes, and I actually personally believe, that Twitter can be part of bringing that kind of civil dialogue and hearing people with smart people with opposing viewpoints have reasoned arguments and bring that back to our culture. So I respect that. That is not going to happen overnight. We're so polarized. Like, he's got to be really determined to work against that vision. I believe that he is. But this hire...
No, but he's not. He's not. Let's be honest. The hire is good because the hire is someone he's used this. He's got 140 million followers, right? Most followed user on. And he's going, I don't care if I lose money. Because he's using it. It's just like his toy. It's that's very egotistical. Sure. And but now we know what he thinks. We'll think that is what Twitter's going to be because we know he owns it and he's been spreading what he thinks. Whereas he could have just been quiet from day one and done a lot of work in the background to create this vision.
He could. I'm not rejecting that perspective. Although I think what he does, and he said something in that same interview, I mean, he models the behavior of saying what you think. It doesn't have to be that the platform represents what he thinks. What he does is model the behavior of, I'm going to say what I think. And he was challenged in the interview, like, why would you say it? And he's like, why wouldn't I? I think it. At any rate, I think what the hire demonstrates, because, whatever fancy title she had at NBC Universal, and I don't know her, though I do know a lot of folks in ad sales, I can tell you in my experience how sales folks work. They're not the most visionary in an organization. Their job is to sell content. So, the sales folks I worked with at Levi, different category, their job is to go out to the retailers, Macy's, Kohl's, Selfridges, whatever, and sell Levi's. And they often would come back to us at the center and say, well, they don't want it. They want you to do something like this other brand. They want you to do this, but slightly different. So rather than sell the vision for the brand and say, this is a really leading product that you've never seen before, here's why it's going to work, you should buy this and you should present it this way, they always wanted to adapt to the feedback they were getting. So if I apply that model, that's my experience with salespeople across the board. If I apply that model to her thinking, it would be, she's going to go to, her remit is to bring advertisers back. She'd be a great head of sales. I just don't know that makes her a CEO. She's going to go to the advertisers. She has a robust Rolodex, and they're going to say, I'll come back if you do X, Y, or Z. If you do X, Y, or Z is chipping away at his vision. And if he agrees to that, then he makes the product less distinct. Right? He makes it more like all the other social media platforms out there, the large ones that are censoring people and manufacturing consensus and all of that. So that, he's chipped away at the uniqueness of the product and the brand, which makes it less likely that it could succeed. Now, you could argue there's a likelihood it won't succeed anyway if he is maniacal about defending this platform as free speech because people don't want it. You could argue that, but I think they do. I believe in my heart of hearts they do, but it's a longer road, and he's got to be just maniacal about adhering to that and taking some hits along the way. But eventually I think he can demonstrate that people do want it. This can be the destination for free speech. It can actually change the culture. But it's not going to be easy. And it's a longer road than cowing to the advertisers and doing what they want and perhaps getting some of them back, but creating a less unique and distinctive product.
New CEO is about selling. It's about money. And you think there should have been more of a vision?
Look, like I said, I don't know her. I'm basing this on my knowing hundreds, if not thousands of salespeople over the years and what her priorities would be. I think it reflects the pressure he's feeling to bring advertisers back, which is completely understandable. I hope that she aligns with his vision. I just don't think that's what he hired her to bring the advertisers back. And if you bring the advertisers back, not by building the brand into something unique and distinctive, but by chipping away at it and making it something very regular and just like everything else, I think that limits the long-term viability. So it's but hey, I could be wrong about her. But when I look at her history, not just the fact that she's a salesperson, but even, her behaviors and actions over the last few years, especially during COVID, where she was all in on the narrative. I don't know. I question her willingness
maybe then
to
he
actually.
Can bring, if he brought somebody in that maybe wasn't all over the narrative, then people would think, well, it's not going to be a platform for everyone. It's really difficult.
But why not?
Make sure you invite everyone. I found it really difficult. I was purely providing a counter narrative during that part because I was trying to rebalance.
Yeah, I guess my view is it's more about strengths and capabilities and less about viewpoint. Although, personally, I scratch my head at her viewpoint and question it, and certainly was, bore the brunt of people who held views like that in the last few years of my life. I would have leaned, and look, who cares what I think? Elon started 5 companies, successful, but little old me, I would have leaned towards someone with that brand building capability that could deliver against his vision. Because if you build a brand, the sales will come. If you generate users and grow the user base, then the advertisers can't help but come back because they need the eyeballs. So rather than adapt the product to what they're saying, the advertisers, the unvisionary advertisers, rather than adapt it to what they're saying they want and chip away at what it could be in terms of its meaning and strength in the marketplace, I would have leaned into somebody with a different sort of capability, and then hired a head of sales underneath of that person to bring in the advertisers, someone who has a great Rolodex and can tell the story of the brand vision and why they need to be here and why the users are coming back and why you got to be here if you want these eyeballs. So I would have sort of looked at it not in terms of her viewpoint, but the capability. And I just question a salesperson's
You know,
capability to build this brand.
what I want to ask you, if you don't mind, is this free speech business? Okay. So I'm aware of people who say, events have been staged and people didn't really die and some really bonkers, crazy stuff. I think it's dangerous, Alex Jones world where they accuse, dying parents whose children have
Yeah,
died.
it's terrible.
That's bad, yeah.
Bad.
And
What's the
that's
line?
especially when people are very vulnerable anyway because of the whole COVID thing. They're looking for answers, and I do see quite a lot of content out there that I think
Yeah, dangerous.
is dangerous because it's not. It is. What do you think of that? Do you think that should be allowed?
I kind of do. I mean,
For
otherwise,
vulnerable
but
people,
otherwise, Anna, who decides? Because our speech was billed to be that dangerous and that lunatic by saying schools should open, by saying children don't get sick and, the harms to them from schools being closed. We were called conspiracy theorists, or I don't know about you, but I was called a conspiracy theorist furthering dangerous, dangerous propaganda. So my point is a person has to decide, and I don't trust corporate leaders and the government to decide what speech is true and what is not. And they can use it to target people. And so I think the price of living in a free society is there is some speech out there that is misleading, but the only thing that combats misleading speech is more true speech. If we had been able to speak and we weren't silenced and censored, there would have been a reasoned conversation about schools and we would have gotten to a different answer. So I just don't like the idea of somebody getting to sit up high and decide what's true and not. And, yes, that
I
means there's
understand
some
that. I
crack.
understand that. I was okay on Twitter for the whole period. I wasn't on YouTube and Facebook, but I've looked back and what happened with the government putting pressure on Twitter would have happened at Facebook, would have happened at YouTube. They have a
It did.
dance. They have to have a relationship with the government, don't they? And in terms of not allowing the publication of what they deem to be dangerous information, which they deemed some information that I shared to be dangerous. So for
Yeah.
certain individuals like Dr. Roger Hodgkinson or Dr. Mike Yeadon or Dr. Teslari, these particular
Yeah.
individuals were immediately censored on Facebook and
Yeah.
YouTube, but not Twitter. I was all right with Twitter. Twitter did well. Facebook weren't too bad. I lost my YouTube channel on Christmas Day and got it back. I lost it again. It's scary. It is scary. I understand. But I've had a lot of abuse on Twitter since Elon Musk took over.
Mm.
And what's happened for me is I've stopped wanting to be in the arena because I've just withdrawn. I've become scared of
Yeah.
being myself and showing and sharing my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's not nice. So I've withdrawn quite a lot.
I understand that. Yeah, I understand that. And I mean, I think there is a hard line around actual incitement to violence. And it's just, to me, that's a bright line. But, things I said were perceived to be incitement to violence. Saying, we need schools to open, that was considered violence against teachers. It's not. So there's this whole gray area. And I think there's this sort of willingness to expand the notion. I mean, we hear all the time now, speech is violent. So if I say something that you disagree with, is that violence? No. When I say, it's a bright line and actual incitement to violence needs to be, eliminated from the platform, it's a literal incitement to violence, not this sort of expanded definition. Is there all kinds of unpleasantness? Yeah, I don't read it.
It's a reflection of humanity, and that's COVID was a reflection of the humanity, and AI, as it comes along, is going to be a reflection of humanity, and it's looking pretty ugly to me at the moment. I have to say, I was like,
it is.
But it's a big job to be done here, Jennifer. It's quite a big job to be done.
It's a big job, but I think the only way out is through, and I think you need people who are willing to model difficult conversations respectfully, and we don't even have the place we can do that right now. I have been invited on Fox more times than I can count, and people consider me this, from the left, my former political affiliation, just evil and horrible because I've been willing to do it. But they're willing to talk to me, even though we disagree on all kinds of other stuff. Now, what they won't talk to me about is the stuff we disagree on. So they're really no better. And now we see they've ousted a bunch of their very popular anchors because they kind of colored outside the line. So I just, we've got to get back to it. You used to be able to have these conversations, and there needs to be some place where it can be modeled. And I think the only thing that protects speech is more speech. More disagreement helps get us to the truth, and we don't have any place for that right now. So, will he be successful in doing it? I have no idea. I do think he models the behavior, and that's his intention more than saying my view is the right view. So we'll see.
Oh no,
I
he
think we
said
have
some
to.
great stuff. Yeah, he said, I want people to disagree with me. I want lots of different voices. You have a right to, yeah, to completely disagree with me, and I want that. No, he has said some really good stuff. He's very powerful, very rich, that it makes people a bit suspicious, doesn't it? Because he's
Sure. And then he acts like weirdly like a regular person. He's not worried about his image that much. He goes around, he's sort of like the mayor of Twitter, the MC, and he goes around fighting with people and say, like, why is a CEO doing this? It's so weird. I actually find it kind of charming. Like, he's like, I'm a normal person. I mean, people would say to me, why? I'm nothing like Elon, but like, why are you talking about this stuff? Why are you're the president of Levi's? You need to be quiet. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm a person. You don't give up your personhood because you're a leader. I'm just a person. I'm a mom.
sometimes you have to be it in private, though, don't you? That's the thing with journalism, right? You're supposed to be completely impartial, really.
But that's the job.
So you're the
That wasn't
host,
my
say,
job.
the host of a debate. It wasn't your job, but I guess when you were in a position of influence and power. So, when you're small, I think your voice can be more controversial and bigger. But when you get more influential, it almost feels like you have to say less because you have the
I,
power to
I don't
influence so many.
I don't accept that because I was also very much permitted to say anything I wanted as long as it aligned with their views. I backed particular candidates, and this was using my title in my bio. Whereas when I was talking about schools, I removed my title or any affiliation with Levi's. So it was perfectly fine if I went and
Absolutely, yeah.
touted controversial views as long as they were aligned with the organization. They weren't asking me in any way not to have a viewpoint. They were asking me not to have this particular viewpoint. And I guess the last thing I will say is if somebody who has power and influence and is well liked in an organization like myself after 23 years there can't say a thing and can't stand up for what she believes in, and is told, you can't say anything about this particular candidate because the organization is affiliated with this particular candidate, meaning Gavin Newsom, then why do we think a mid-level employee is going to be able to? That's where I don't agree with you that if someone with power and influence
Oh
can't,
no,
then there's no way.
only in that it helps that conversation. That's all I mean. Is if you get a really big platform and you have lots and lots of followers, to listen to everyone is healthy. Then it's a
Yeah.
healthier attitude to inspire, I guess, is what I'm
But
trying.
for me, maintaining this perspective, yes, I had a big job, a powerful job, but I'm a regular person. I'm a mom of four. I'm just acting as a citizen. I don't give up my rights, my right to have a point of view, my right to vote, just because I am, the leader of a very well-known brand. And I would expect that no one in this company gives that right up. I'm doing it for you. I want you to be able to say what you think and not worry about losing your job. I want you to be able to vote for who you want to vote for and not worry about losing your job. That's
So
illegal.
important. That is so important for our children for the future, isn't it? To have that and to welcome courage in a time of crisis and an emergency that we were in. The people that spoke out for children are heroes. They really are. You are as well, absolutely. And it's been a delight.
I think courage begets courage. Somebody has to model the behavior. And I don't think what we saw and experienced during COVID is any different than the sort of way the population breaks down across time and geography. Most people are obedient. Most people would rather stand with the crowd than stand up and do what's right. But then a few people are willing to buck the crowd and say the truth, and eventually they bring others along. That's just the way it's been since forever. And every sort of study proves that, every psychological study, everything. So it's dependent on those who are clear-headed, who are actually looking at the real data, not the manufactured data, and are willing to endure the slings and arrows of getting to the truth and being called all the names. And eventually, I believe truth outs eventually. And
I
so you just
agree.
have to stick with
Like cream, it rises to the top. Where can we get hold of you? How can we support you? What are you doing now? Um,
it. Well, I wrote a book called Levi's Unbuttoned, which people can get on Amazon or wherever books are sold. I don't know about it in the UK, but definitely Amazon. Um, I am on Twitter still, probably not a good idea. And I have a Substack, which you can find just at Jennifer Say on Substack.
and are you working now? Are you doing any work at the moment?
I, I'm doing some consulting with some smaller startup and pre-startup businesses, but I would like to lead a brand or a company again. So I'm out there talking to folks, but people are a
Have you
little
ever
afraid
thought
of
about going
leaders
into
who,
politics? And have you thought about going into politics?
no,
I don't fancy it either.
no,
It's been an absolute
not for
pleasure.
me.
It's really has been.
Thanks, you too, Anna.
Thank you for what you did, and let's look with hope to the future. Um,
I agree. You can't stop trying.
can't stop trying now. You take care.
Thanks, you too.
All the
Bye bye.
best. Bye.